everyone and welcome to Plainest Pages. Today we're talking about another poem on the Edexcel A-level English literature curriculum, Genetics by Sinead Morrissey. As usual, let's start with a quick biography and summary and then move on to the more detailed line-by-line analysis. Sinead Morrissey is a Northern Irish poet. She was educated in Dublin and Trinity College and shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize, and her collection titled On Balance has been awarded the Forward Prize for Poetry. Genetics talks about the speaker's body and how it is not just a body. More than that, it's a product of love of the speaker's parents. It explores themes of family, marriage, love, and identity, and the speaker lifts up her hands and looks at them and remarks that although her parents' marriage isn't a thing anymore because they divorced, they're no longer together, their love was once real and it's preserved in her hands, and she looks towards her significant other in the hope for a brighter future for herself and her child. Her parents' destiny is not her own, and she's willing to make her own path in life. A few notes about the structure first. The poem is written in a villanelle structure. It's made out of 19 lines. There are 5 tercets, 3 lines, and 1 quatrain, 4 lines. So there's a relatively rigid rhyme scheme of ABA and ABAA for the final quatrain. The first and last lines of the tercet alternate as the final line. So first it's hands, then palms, then hands, etc. And they're also the final 2 lines of the quatrain. Although villanelles often do use meter, they do not have to use any one type of meter in particular. So Morrissey manages to conserve the structure and have her poem be very orderly and at the same time free and almost like carefree, suiting the uplifting and hopeful tone of the speaker quite well. The villanelle is also a great choice structurally because it beautifully shows the separation and togetherness of the parents and the fingers and the palms. The whole poem is made from only 2 rhymes, and the way the words interlace shows the complex inheritance. It's almost itself like a double helix shape. The villanelle's circular nature is also reminiscent of a ring, again very symbolical considering the central theme of marriage. My father's in my fingers, but my mother's in my palms. I lift them up and look at them with pleasure. I know my parents made me by my hands. Okay, so at this point you might say, where is the rhyme? But palms and hands is a half rhyme, so the words echo each other. They touch in meaning, they touch in sound, but they are not quite the same. And likewise, the speaker wants to convey that although her parents were very similar and their love was very real, they were ultimately different people, which is why their love fell apart, which is why they didn't last. And it's the same for her. Although she is both a product of her father and her mother, she's not a carbon copy of neither her father nor her mother. She is her own very unique and new person. And there's a lot of possessive pronouns here, so my father in my fingers, my mother in my palms, and I think this shows very much the closeness that she feels towards her parents, even though she is no longer with them in the poem and she doesn't really feel happy that they broke up. She still feels as if they are her parents, so no matter what they've done, she still feels a sense of belonging. The words father and mother are separated by a comma. Actually, there's a lot of caesura and enjambment throughout the entire poem showing their distance and separation, but although they are separated, they are still together in a way because they are linked in her. She is the product of their love, and we can see this through the parallel grammar. Even though they may not be together, they cannot completely part ways because they have a child together. So even though they are not physically in the same space, as we will see in the following stanza, they touch where her fingers and her palms meet, so this part, and she says that even though you might feel as if you're not there with your parents or that your parents' love is long gone, the fact that you exist, the fact that you have hands which you can look at and you can see the DNA, your genetics inside are what makes it up. They're the real living evidence of your history. And the verb lift them up when talking about the hands is also significant. So the speaker constantly admires the parents in more ways than one. She both physically lifts her hands to examine them, and she lifts her parents up in her eyes too. She constantly uses verbs throughout the poem. She keeps it moving in this way, adding a sense of life to it. She has the sense of pleasure not only from knowing her parents are with her, but from feeling like she belongs, that she's part of the family even if the family is not there. The opening line is in iambic heptameter, and the third line is missing some syllables, but although it's not perfect, the rhythm is still da-dum, echoing a heartbeat and representing that her parents love her still, no matter the distance, no matter the time. They may have been repelled to separate lands, to separate hemispheres, may sleep with other lovers, but in me they touch where fingers link to palms. We see here that the parents have split up and there is little warmth or intimacy left between them. They are not together physically and want to put as much distance between the two of them as possible. Their bodies repel to separate lands. It shows that they have been physically thrown apart, almost like two magnets, that they can no longer be together because they have become just I mean, I want to say polar opposites, but it would be incorrect to say that in terms of science and like magnets. But they are physically incompatible anymore. There's like an aura between them that means that they cannot be together, and that's why they seek to put as much distance between each other as possible. So they put all this land physically, they put all these other lovers, all these other bodies in terms of emotionally, so they don't want to have anything to do with each other. But although the speaker recognizes it, she doesn't let it deter her. She doesn't let it deter her because she always feels as if they live on inside her, as if they're right there, as if just by looking at her fingers, she feels their connection, even if the connection is no longer present. She preserves it in herself. I think it's also interesting that the speaker uses the word may, so like they may be repelled, they may have lovers. It's almost like she's allowing it, she's making a concession, like, yeah, so what if they do this? Because even if they are no longer together, they once were. The history, you cannot forget this history because the history is there. The history is in your genetics. I think that's the reason that the poem is titled Genetics, because it's all around us, just like history. It's inside us and we can seek to recognize it. And even when we feel alone, we're never fully alone because we have all this history hidden inside our genetics, even though we don't usually realize. With nothing left of their togetherness but friends who query for their image by a river, at least I know their marriage by my hands. There is no love left in her parents' marriage but friends, and I think this could be interpreted in two ways. So the first one could be that the parents are just friends. So they're not in a marriage anymore together. They don't want to be lovers. They don't want to share intimacy. They can only share intimacy platonically the way friends do, and they don't want to be anything more than friends. That's, I think, one option here. And I think the second option, more likely, is that they had shared friends, and now that they're broken up, the friends don't really know what to do because they feel awkward picking sides. They feel awkward just supporting one because it feels like a betrayal to the other when there has been so much hurt between the two. And I also think that in a breakup, it's sometimes difficult for friends to reconcile with the new image, especially if it was a very tight-knit group. So before, there was this image of togetherness and wholeness, and now we're still friends, we're still in a group, but it's not quite the same. And I think that's why the speaker uses such an uncomfortable word, query. It's very reminiscent of the word quarrel. So they're not quite quarreling, but there's this sense of discomfort, this sense of a rift in the group, and it's tangible even through the poem many years later, because this breakup left such a huge impact on everything, not only on the speaker's life, but on many people's life. It's not just one love that has been broken. The breaking of one love has deeper reaching consequences. Query for their image by a river. So just their image, their relationship, it's like a river. It's volatile, it bends, it turns, it changes, much like any relationship. And the speaker looks at that, and of course it's sad in a way that this relationship has been broken, that there are so many people left behind just to query and to feel uncomfortable, but at least, she says, I can still find comfort and solace in my hands. I shape a chapel where a steeple stands, and when I turn it over, my father's by my fingers, my mother's by my palms. Throughout the poem, it may have felt a bit childish in a way to keep repeating hands and palms, almost like the speaker's inner child is still feeling very hurt that the parents have broken up. Even as an adult, it has affected her, and so she's desperately repeating hands and palms in an attempt to link and fix what has been broken. But now we see that actually the speaker was playing at a nursery rhyme. Okay, so this is a very British thing. I remember my friends teaching me this when I first came to the UK. So you put your fingers like this, and then this is like the church, and this is like the door to the church, and then you flip it over, and these are the guests inside. So we used to do this as children. And so when she says, I shape a steeple with my hands, I think this is what she means. And we see that she's like a child. She's trying to reconcile them with her hands. Like, although they may not be physically together, in me, these are the guests and they're getting married, and she has this vivid images of reconstructing her parents' marriage in her head, that in her fantasy life everything would be okay and they would still be together, and when she would look at her hands she wouldn't just see history or a memory, she would feel the present love as well. But we see that that's not the case, and I think it's at this stanza that we really begin to feel sympathy for the narrator and identify with her. Even if our own parents' relationship is strong or it's good, we just feel sympathy for her because we see someone who has lost love and is desperately wanting to get it back, just for the sake of her parents and for the sake of her. She wants to craft her own perfect family, and that's why she tries to marry her parents, to give them another shot at this thing that you call love. Demure before a priest reciting psalms, my body is their marriage register. I reenact their wedding with my hands. So not only do we have a church, but we have a vivid image of all the guests standing together and the priest. In place of looking at the actual marriage record, or even the photographs, she instead looks at her hands. They are the cue that leads to the memory. They're Proust Madeleine. So Proust Madeleine, of course, Proust bit the Madeleine, and then he had this flood of memories and emotions coming back to him of his childhood. And likewise for the speaker, she looks up at her hands, and when she sees this bit where her fingers and her palms touch, this is what she thinks about. This is what memories this brings back. And I think this would be a wonderful poem to compare to Effects by Alan Jenkins, because in that poem the speaker there is touching his mother's hand because his mother is dead, and that's when he remembers everything that she has done for him, and it's a very sad and emotional and poignant poem. So I think comparing the two of them would be very apt. I would also like to point out how important hands play a symbol and an image in both of these poems, and just hands in general, because touch is one of our senses, and so I think for her it's very significant that it's specifically the hands where the parents meet, not the eyes or anything. It's the hands, because whenever she does anything, whenever she touches anything, she feels directly connected to her bloodline, connected to her family. She always feels as if they're there no matter what she does, because sense is such an important part of her life, and so is touch. And I think that's also the reason why many couples hold hands, because they want to feel closer, they want to feel like this connection, this bridge between the two of them, crossing the physical distance further, and so they try to do that through their senses, through the way they perceive the world. So take me with you, take up the skin's demands, for mirroring in bodies of the future. I'll bequeath my fingers if you bequeath your palms. We know our parents make us by our hands. And here the speaker addresses some unknown person, possibly her significant other. This bit here shows that she's hopeful. Yes, her parents broke up. Yes, all they left behind was some quarreling friends by the river, and their marriage long gone, and they're taking other lovers and they're in distant lands. But I'm here and I'm alive, and my existence is proof that love is real, and love can be unpredictable, and the speaker just wants to give it a chance, and she's very willing to do that. She openly says that let's do it together. Let's take that chance, and I'll give my fingers and you'll give your palms, and even if we break up at some point, our love is pure and it will be preserved in our future child. So the speaker's child will get to inherit new traits and can be a record of the speaker's own existence. And again, she reminds us that children aren't exact replicas of their parents, that just because your parents did this and you have the same eyes as them, it doesn't mean that you're going to follow the same path as them. She's very willing and she's very ready to forge her own new destiny. So although she looks at her hands and she sees history, and history can be very sad, and although it's romantic, it's also sad because she recognizes that it's just that history, it no longer exists. She doesn't feel completely saddened by the history. She feels, on the contrary, as if it's an inspiration, that she can be different from her parents and she can make her own path while remembering that they love her in their own way. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for watching and see you soon.